Hi guys, I put together this little training on blended ROAS to help you understand why it's such an important metric for us in 2021. So without further ado, let me just pull together my slides for you, and here we go. Whoops, sorry, I just need to share my screen. And here we go. Present. Right, so just a quick background for those who don't know about the big changes that have happened with iOS 14 in the last sort of 6 months or so. So just a quick recap. So first and foremost, before iOS released the changes to their mobile platform, allowing people to opt out of tracking, the first thing Facebook did in response was actually reduce the attribution window. So we can only now see performance that happens within 7 days of a click. Whereas before we could see 30 days. So if someone buys outside of that 30-day window after having seen your ad, we just won't know. It's not to say that it hasn't happened, we just won't see it in the data. So that drastically reduced our ability to track campaigns. Then the second thing that happened was that the iOS 14 released and allowed people to opt out of tracking. And we are seeing around, I think it's at last count, in the 80% is the number of people who are opting out of tracking. And most people have now updated their phones. I think it's 80 or 90% adoption rate. So if your site has maybe on average 60, 70, 80% of your traffic coming from iOS, then you can kind of work that out and realize that probably more than half of your tracking is actually being lost. So as well as the reduced window, the people that are tracking within that window reduced even further by 50% roughly. So that's the second thing. So 50% of the sales that are happening, we just won't see them. And then the third thing that's happening is Facebook started modeling data and delaying attribution. So they're trying to kind of mess around and figure out the algorithm to make it easier for us to figure out whether campaigns are working, which means they're using modeled data, but also delaying attribution. So we're seeing attributions that are coming in a few days late, which makes it hard to optimize as well. So those three things together have meant that the data we now have on the campaigns is pretty bad. So we're still driving sales from the ads. They're still happening in real life on your site. They'll be reflected in your total site numbers, but we're not seeing the tracking of them. So we're acting in the dark, right? We're trying to optimize in the dark. So we're trying to figure out ways in which we can find data that will help us to make decisions about whether to spend more or to spend less, whether your campaigns are working or not working. So yeah, so I said that the net impact of this, we estimate around 40 to 60% of sales being driven by your ads and now invisible in Ads Manager. Yeah, so as I said, makes results look worse than they really are. Sales are still happening, but we can't see them. Or maybe they're not, we just can't tell. So what is the solution? Well, there isn't really a solution on the tracking front. There are some paid for solutions you can buy in, but again, nothing is perfect. There's some super technical stuff we can do with CAPI and with offline conversions, and we'll talk to you about that in due course, but none of these are solutions for the fact that if people have opted out, the chances are we're not going to see those conversions show up in our data. So what's the solution? Enter this new metric, which we need to see if your ad spend is doing well or badly, right? Now, blended ROAS, or otherwise known as marketing efficiency ratio, is what's being used by all of the movers and shakers, I guess, in the digital marketing world. And in fact, it's a metric that's been used for a long time. It was used long before all of this tracking made it even possible for us to track the effectiveness of marketing. And what marketing efficiency ratio is all about is telling us, I spent a certain amount of money, how much did I drive in terms of revenue, and what's the relationship between those? If I double my spend, did I double my revenue? If I spent on a bunch of new channels, did that increase my revenue or did it stay the same? So it's a really great way to see the correlation between what you're spending and what your results are, or everything else you're doing in terms of your marketing. Did you do a big push in PR this month? Did you do a bunch more extra emails? Was there some local press about you? Did you have an influencer who's talking a lot about you? All of these things are the inputs that drive the output, which is your marketing efficiency ratio. So we're not suggesting that we would use marketing efficiency ratio to say that, oh, all of your sales are coming from Facebook ads, but in fact, it's quite the opposite. It's a way for us to say, well, overall, how effective is your marketing? And when we make changes to your Facebook ads, does it make the marketing more effective or less effective? And when you make changes to other parts of your marketing, does that make your overall marketing spend more effective or less effective? If you double your spend on Google ads, does your marketing efficiency ratio go up or down? And it's a way for us to have a discussion as your marketing partner about strategically whether that input you're putting into your marketing machine, whether that's more spending on Facebook ads, whether that's new creative, whether that's Google ad spending, whether that's doing PR, whether those inputs are having a good impact on your downstream metric, which is your marketing efficiency ratio, or are having a bad impact. So I've got a little illustration to kind of talk you through how we would use marketing efficiency ratio to kind of measure the impact of your inputs, right? So there's a couple of scenarios here. So in March 2021, tracking was all fine. We hadn't reduced the tracking window. Everything was kind of tracking as expected. So in this scenario, this brand has spent £100 on Facebook ads, £100 on Google ads, and they've gotten £300 back from Facebook ads, so that's a ROAS of 3. They've got £300 back from Google ads, and that's also a ROAS of 3. So their total site revenue is £900, so 300 plus 300, leaving 300 in organic revenue, and that could be because of PR, because of other things they're doing, but let's just call it organic revenue for now. So that gives them an overall blended ROAS or marketing efficiency ratio of 4.5, which is the total site revenue 900 divided by the spend on ads, which is 200. Yeah, so that must be, yeah, that's right. So 900 divided by 2 is 4.5. So that's correct. Just checking my maths there. Right. In the second scenario, April comes along and we lose a little bit of the tracking. So the spend on Facebook ads stays the same, 100, but only gets 200 in tracked revenue. Google ads stays the same, but still gets 300 in tracked revenue. But the total site revenue actually stays the same because the organic revenue has gone up. So we can infer from that there's been an estimated untracked extra revenue of £100, and it probably comes from Facebook. In this scenario, if all things were equal, we can see that, you know, the net impact was the same, 900 in site revenue from the same amount of spend, 200 in spend. So it's the same blended ROAS. So that tells us, with the only change being the change in the tracking, we can assume that, hey, the campaigns are performing just as well as they were, even though their ROAS appears to have dropped. Right. And then scenario 3 is when this brand says, well, you know, my marketing's working well, so I think Facebook ads is still working, even though it appears to have dropped. I can see from this blended ROAS that it looks to be the same. So I'm going to run an experiment and I'm going to double my spend on Facebook ads. So they double their spend on Facebook ads. They get a bit more in tracked revenue, but the ROAS is actually only 1.5. So they need to know, is this actually, has it dropped in performance or is it actually doing okay? Google spend, they keep the same because that's a good idea to kind of only change one variable at once. And their Google tracked revenue is 300. So their Google tracked ROAS stays at 3. But this site overall revenue jumps to 1,200. From this, we can then see that means the organic revenue is 600 because we know that the track revenue is 600. So that leaves 600 in organic. So the organic revenue has gone up versus this initial scenario by 300. So there's an estimated untracked revenue of an extra 300. And when we add this all together, that's a blended ROAS of 4. So that we can see that by upping the spend, we've definitely driven more revenue. So that's great. We can see that it's impacted the revenue because we've kept everything else the same. The blended ROAS has gone down slightly, as you would expect, because the proportion of sales from ads means, so you've already got a baseline of organic revenue. And so in order to increase to keep the ROAS the same, you would have to grow your organic revenue by the same amount that you were growing your paid revenue. So we do see blended ROAS will go down as you scale. But you can see this is a happy result. And this would tell me as the brand owner, this extra spend has really worked because it's actually driven an additional revenue here of 300 of untracked over and above the standard organic. So you could get sort of really into the detail of trying to figure out how much the organic revenue is in Google Analytics. But again, because so much, we don't know how much is tracked and untracked, the best way for us to understand it is to look at this blended ROAS here and say, well, is it broadly heading in the right direction? We've increased the spend by £100. We've doubled it on Facebook. And have we managed to grow our revenue? Yes. And is the ratio still broadly in a good position? Yes. Is this a profitable ratio for us? Yes. So therefore, we could say this experiment was a success. And then in June, you might say, right, okay, we'll keep the Facebook the same. And we're going to spend more on Google and see what that does to our blended ROAS. Or we might pour a whole lot of money into PR. So leave these channels the same, pour a whole lot of money into PR. So you would add another few lines here with PR and add the spend in for PR here, and then see how that impacts your overall revenue and also your blended revenue as a result. And it's a good way to measure, when you change kind of one thing at a time, the overall performance of your marketing generally, and is it headed in the right direction? So I hope that illustrates for you that blended ROAS is not for us about claiming all the revenue back to Facebook. It's about us finding a way to measure the impact overall of your integrated marketing activities and see whether as a whole are performing efficiently or not efficiently. And also to see whether if we make changes to what we spend on Facebook or how we're doing it, whether it's positively impacting your business or negatively impacting or about the same. So I hope that makes sense and explains a little bit more about blended ratio or marketing efficiency, blended ROAS or marketing efficiency ratio, which are the same thing really. Thanks for listening. Bye.